The Battle of Britain, the summer Hitler could not cross the sea. In the summer of 1940, Britain waited beneath a dark and restless sky. Across the English Channel, the German army stood victorious. France had fallen. Belgium had fallen. The Netherlands had fallen. Norway had surrendered. And now, from the ports of occupied Europe, the German war machine looked west, toward the last major enemy still standing alone: Britain. For centuries, the sea had protected the island. The Channel had been a barrier, a shield of gray water separating Britain from the armies of Europe. But in June 1940, that shield suddenly looked thin. On clear days, from the cliffs of Dover, a person could look across the water and know that the enemy was waiting on the other side. German soldiers occupied the French coast. German aircraft flew from airfields only minutes away. German naval officers studied the tides. And in Britain, people began to imagine something that had not happened for generations: enemy troops landing on British soil. Villages were told to prepare. Road signs were removed, so invaders could not use them. Beaches were blocked with wire and mines. Concrete pillboxes appeared along roads, bridges, fields, and coastlines. Farmhouses were turned into strongpoints. Railway lines and roads were prepared for demolition. Across the country, men too old for regular military service joined the Home Guard. Some had fought in the First World War. Some had never fired a weapon. Many did not even have rifles. But they trained anyway. They drilled in fields after work. They learned how to watch roads, guard bridges, and report suspicious aircraft. They were told that if the Germans came, every village, every town, every road, and every field might matter. Britain was afraid. But fear did not mean surrender. It meant preparation. The country knew that the next battle would decide whether the island remained free. And before any German soldier could cross the Channel, Germany first had to win the sky. That was the condition. The German army could not invade while British fighters still flew over southern England. The German Navy could not protect a slow invasion fleet, while the Royal Navy waited in British ports. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, had to destroy the Royal Air Force. It had to break fighter command. It had to clear the skies. Only then could Hitler's invasion plan, Operation Sea Lion, become possible. And so the future of Britain came to rest on aircraft, radar towers, airfields, operations rooms, ground crews, and young pilots climbing into cockpits again and again. The battle would be fought in the air, but it would be won by an entire system. To understand that summer, we must return to the shock that came before it. In May 1940, Germany attacked in the West. The Allies expected a replay of 1914, a German thrust through Belgium. Part of the attack did come there. But the decisive blow came through the Ardennes, a forested region that many Allied commanders believed was unsuitable for a major armored assault. They were wrong. German tanks poured through the forest, crossed the Meuse River, and raced toward the English Channel. The British and French armies in Belgium were cut off. Within days, hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers were trapped near Dunkirk, with the sea behind them and the German army closing in. Britain launched a desperate evacuation. Operation Dynamo. Warships crossed the Channel. Ferries crossed. Fishing boats crossed. Yachts, lifeboats, merchant vessels, and small civilian craft crossed. Under bombing, shellfire, smoke, and fear, more than 300,000 Allied soldiers were brought home. It became known as the Miracle of Dunkirk. But Churchill warned Britain not to mistake survival for victory. Wars are not won by evacuations. The men had been saved, but most of their heavy equipment had been abandoned. Tanks were left behind. Artillery was left behind. Trucks, ammunition, radios, and supplies were left behind. Britain had rescued an army, but it had not rescued the weapons that army needed. Then, one by one, the final pieces of the old European order collapsed. On June 10, Norway surrendered. On June 14, German troops entered Paris. On June 22, France signed an armistice. Hitler chose the same railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne, where Germany had signed the armistice in 1918. It was revenge staged as ceremony. France was divided. Germany occupied the north and west. A collaborationist French government was established in Vichy. Britain now stood alone in Western Europe. The situation was worse than British planners had imagined before the war. Germany controlled airfields, ports, and coastlines from Norway to western France. German aircraft could reach British cities. German submarines could threaten Atlantic supply lines. German troops could gather within sight of England. And Britain's home forces were not fully ready. In June 1940, Britain had divisions on paper, but many were under strength. Some lacked weapons. Some lacked vehicles. Some lacked modern training. More men were arriving from overseas. More were being called up. Factories were working urgently. But the crisis had come too quickly. So Britain improvised. It built defenses with concrete, steel, barbed wire, and imagination. The coast was fortified. Likely landing beaches were blocked. Roads were prepared for roadblocks. Bridges were prepared for demolition. Inland defensive lines were created to slow a German advance if the beaches were breached. There were also more unusual weapons. Flame traps were prepared in some places, designed to pour burning fuel across roads or beaches. Secret auxiliary units were formed. These men would stay behind if the Germans landed, hiding in underground bases and attacking supply lines, fuel dumps, bridges, and communication routes. They were expected to survive only briefly. But their purpose was clear. If Britain were occupied, the occupation would not be peaceful. Everywhere the country prepared to resist. The government issued warnings about German paratroopers. The fall of the Low Countries had shown what airborne troops could do. In Belgium, German glider troops had helped capture the fortress of Epernay. In the Netherlands, paratroopers had seized key bridges and caused confusion behind the front. To British civilians, paratroopers became a special fear. They could appear without warning. In fields, on roads, near villages, behind defenses. British citizens were told not to help them. Do not give them food. Do not give them bicycles. Do not give them maps. Do not answer questions. Hide anything useful. Even ordinary people were being prepared for invasion. But behind the fear, there was a surprising truth. Hitler did not begin the summer of 1940 with a clear and determined plan to invade Britain. He had expected Britain to recognize that the war on the continent was lost. He believed Britain might seek peace. In his own strange way, Hitler admired the British Empire. He did not necessarily want to destroy it immediately. What he wanted was British acceptance of German dominance in Europe. Germany would rule the continent. Britain could keep its empire. That was the arrangement he hoped London might accept. But Churchill would not accept it. Churchill had become Prime Minister on May 10, the same day Germany launched its offensive in the West. He knew Britain was in danger. He knew the army was weakened. He knew the empire was stretched. He knew many people feared invasion. But he also understood something essential. If Britain made peace with Hitler in 1940, Europe would belong to Nazi Germany. So he refused. He spoke to Parliament, and the people not with promises of easy victory, but with words of endurance. Blood, toil, tears, sweat. He told Britain it would fight on the beaches, in the fields, in the streets, and in the hills. He said Britain would never surrender. Hitler waited for Britain to change its mind. It did not. British bombers continued to attack German targets. British ships continued the war at sea. British resistance continued. And so, on July 16, 1940, Hitler issued Directive No. 16. Germany would prepare for an invasion of England. The operation was called Sea Lion. But even the wording of the order revealed hesitation. Hitler said that because England showed no willingness to reach an understanding, he had decided to prepare a landing operation and, if necessary, carry it out. If necessary. Those words mattered. Operation Sea Lion was not born from confidence. It was born from frustration. Once the order was given, the German armed forces had to create a plan. And almost immediately, they ran into problems. The German army wanted a broad landing. It imagined an invasion across a wide front, with many divisions, artillery, tanks, engineers, and supplies. Army planners thought of it almost like crossing a great river. Difficult but possible with enough aggression. The German army had just conquered France through speed, risk, and momentum. Its commanders believed that boldness could overcome obstacles. But the Channel was not a river. And the German Navy knew it. The Kriegsmarine had suffered badly during the Norway campaign. It had lost ships. It was much weaker than the Royal Navy. It did not have enough transport. It did not have enough landing craft. It did not have enough escort vessels. And it could not guarantee protection for a huge invasion fleet moving slowly across the Channel. The Navy wanted a narrower landing, a more concentrated operation, something it might be able to protect with mines, aircraft, submarines, and limited naval forces. The Army hated this idea. A narrow landing meant fewer troops ashore, fewer guns, fewer tanks, a smaller bridgehead, more danger of being trapped by British counterattacks. One senior Army officer said the Navy's proposal would put the landing forces directly into a meat grinder. In the end, Germany produced a compromise. The first wave would include around 13 divisions. About 90,000 men would land on the south coast of England. Later waves would bring more troops, more supplies, and more vehicles. The Germans hoped to build a bridgehead, push inland, and eventually threaten London. They believed that if London were isolated, the British government might surrender, just as France had after Paris fell. But Sea Lion had deep flaws. The first was surprise. There would be very little. The British were watching the coast. They had radar. They had aircraft. They had intelligence. They had observers. They would notice the gathering of barges, ships, men, and supplies. The tides also made the plan difficult. Different beaches could only be approached at certain times. Some German units would land hours before others. There could be long gaps between waves. A delay of even a few hours might give the British time to respond. The second problem was experience. Germany had almost no experience with large amphibious operations. Its army was excellent on land. Its air force had been devastating in support of fast campaigns. But amphibious warfare is different. It requires specialized ships, trained crews, beach reconnaissance, naval fire support, tight cooperation between Army, Navy, and Air Force, careful logistics, weather planning. Germany had not built itself for this. The third problem was transport. Germany did not possess enough proper landing craft. To solve this, the Navy gathered river barges from across occupied Europe. Thousands of barges were modified for the crossing. Some had ramps added. Some were reinforced. Some had engines installed. Others would be towed. But these were river barges. They were designed for canals and inland waterways, not for the open sea. They were slow, fragile, hard to control, vulnerable to weather, vulnerable to bombs, vulnerable to warships. In rough water, many might sink. Even in good weather, the crossing would be dangerous. The German invasion fleet would not have looked like the Allied fleet that crossed to Normandy in 1944. It would have been improvised. A long, slow procession of barges, tugs, small ships, and transport vessels, carrying soldiers across one of the most dangerous strips of water in Europe. And even if they landed, the problem would not end. An army must be supplied. Every day, food must arrive. Ammunition must arrive. Fuel must arrive. Medical supplies must arrive. Reinforcements must arrive. Tanks and guns need spare parts. Horses and vehicles need transport. A landing force without supplies becomes a trapped force. If the Royal Navy reached the invasion routes, it could cut Sea Lion apart. So everything depended on the Luftwaffe. The German Air Force had to defeat the RAF. It had to control the skies over southern England. It had to protect the invasion fleet. And somehow, it had to make the Channel too dangerous for the Royal Navy. Hermann Göring believed he could do it. Göring was confident, theatrical, and ambitious. The Luftwaffe had helped Germany win in Poland, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. Its Stuka dive bombers had terrified troops and civilians. Its medium bombers had struck airfields and cities. Its fighters had gained valuable experience. To Göring, Britain's fighter defense was an obstacle, but not an impossible one. He believed the RAF could be crushed in weeks. The commander standing against him was Dowding. Dowding was very different from Göring. Quiet, serious, methodical, sometimes distant. But he understood air defense. He had fought to preserve fighter command during the fall of France. When pressure came to send more fighters across the Channel to help the French, Dowding resisted. He knew Britain would soon need every fighter it had. That decision may have saved the country. The RAF had two main modern fighters, the Hawker Hurricane and the Supermarine Spitfire. The Hurricane was older and less glamorous, but strong, stable, and available in larger numbers. It would shoot down many German bombers. The Spitfire was faster, more elegant, and loved by many of its pilots. It became the symbol of the battle. Against them flew the German Messerschmitt Bf 109. The Bf 109 was an excellent fighter. Vast, well-armed, capable of climbing and diving strongly. In some ways it was superior. In other ways, the Spitfire matched or surpassed it. The differences between aircraft mattered. But so did range. German fighters had to fly from bases in France and Belgium. They crossed the Channel, fought over England, and then had to return before fuel ran low. Their time over target was limited. British fighters fought over home ground. They could land, refuel, rearm, and return to the air. If a British pilot bilayed out and survived, he might fly again. If a German pilot bilayed out over Britain, he became a prisoner. This slowly favored the RAF. But Britain's greatest advantage was not only its aircraft. It was the Dowding system. Along the coast stood the tall radar towers of Chain Home. They could detect German aircraft before they reached Britain. Radar reports went to filter rooms. Information was checked, sorted, and sent to Fighter Command. From there, operations rooms directed squadrons into the air. Ground observers added visual reports. Controllers guided fighters toward incoming raids. This system allowed Britain to use limited aircraft efficiently. The RAF did not need to keep every fighter in the air all day. It could wait, watch, then scramble. This was one of the most advanced air defense systems in the world. The Luftwaffe never fully understood it. That misunderstanding would cost Germany dearly. The battle began gradually in July. At first, the Luftwaffe attacked shipping in the Channel. German bombers struck British convoys. Fighters escorted them. The aim was partly to damage shipping, and partly to draw RAF fighters into combat over water. This phase became known as the Channel Battle. For British pilots, fighting over the sea was dangerous. If they were shot down, they might drown before rescue arrived. The RAF lost aircraft and men. The Luftwaffe lost aircraft too. The Stuka, so feared in earlier campaigns, proved vulnerable when facing modern fighters. The Bf 110 heavy fighter also struggled against Hurricanes and Spitfires. By late July and early August, the Germans shifted focus. Now they attacked airfields, radar stations, aircraft factories, and fighter command infrastructure. This was the decisive phase. If the Luftwaffe could destroy the RAF's bases and control system, fighter command might collapse. Some radar stations were hit. Some were damaged. But the Germans did not keep attacking them consistently. Repairs were often made quickly. Airfields were hit harder. Runways were cratered. Hangars burned. Fuel stores exploded. Aircraft were destroyed on the ground. Pilots and ground crews were killed. But the RAF system bent rather than broke. Ground crews worked with extraordinary speed. They filled bomb craters, patched aircraft, reloaded guns, refueled fighters, recovered wrecks, rescued pilots. The battle in the sky depended on people on the ground. Every fighter that rose again did so because mechanics, armorers, drivers, radio operators, and clerks kept the system alive. In the air, the fighting was violent and brief. A pilot might sit in readiness for hours, then suddenly run to his aircraft. The engine would start. The squadron would climb. Controllers would call out height and direction. Then the enemy would appear. Bombers in formation. Fighters above them. Sun flashing on wings. Contrails twisting in the blue sky. Machine guns and cannon firing. A few seconds of aim. A burst. A turn. A dive. Then either escape or death. Many pilots never saw who shot them down. The RAF was under terrible pressure. Some squadrons flew several times a day. Pilots became exhausted. New replacements arrived with too little training. Some survived only a few days. The Luftwaffe also suffered. German bomber crews faced repeated interceptions. If shot down, they were killed, wounded, or captured. Losses mounted. But German intelligence continued to believe the RAF was nearly finished. This belief was wrong. Fighter command was strained, but still alive. On August 15, the Luftwaffe launched major attacks from several directions. German aircraft from Norway attacked northern England, expecting weak defenses. Instead, they met RAF fighters from groups that had not been heavily engaged in the south. The attackers suffered badly. This day showed that fighter command was not only a southern force. Britain had depth. The Luftwaffe had miscalculated again. Still, the pressure in the south remained intense. In late August, RAF sector stations and airfields were bombed repeatedly. Biggin Hill, Kenley, Hornchurch, North Weald, Debden, Tangmere. These names became part of the battle. If enough sector stations had been knocked out for long enough, the RAF's command system might have been seriously damaged. This was perhaps the most dangerous moment for Britain. But then the battle changed. British bombers attacked Berlin. The physical damage was not great, but the psychological impact was enormous. Hitler had promised that Berlin would not be bombed. Now it had been. Germany responded by shifting attacks toward London. On September 7, the Luftwaffe launched a massive raid on the British capital. The docks and East End burned. Warehouses exploded. Streets filled with smoke. Civilians were killed in large numbers. The Blitz had begun. For Londoners, it was a night of terror. For the RAF, it was also a strange relief. The Luftwaffe had reduced pressure on fighter command's airfields at the very moment when they were under greatest strain. Airfields could recover. Runways could be repaired. Sector stations could restore operations. Pilots could regroup. Germany hoped bombing London would break morale and draw the RAF into a final battle. It did not break Britain. The climax came on September 15, 1940. German bombers and fighters crossed the Channel in large daylight raids. The RAF rose to meet them. Squadrons from across southern England entered the fight. The sky filled with aircraft. Bombers pushed toward London. Fighters fought above and around them. German escorts tried to protect the bombers, but close escort limited their freedom. British fighters attacked repeatedly. The Luftwaffe suffered heavy losses. The raids failed to destroy fighter command. They failed to break London. They failed to achieve the decisive victory Göring had promised. September 15 would later be remembered as Battle of Britain Day. 2 days later, Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The invasion would not come. The bombing did not stop. London would endure many more nights of fire. Other cities would suffer too. Coventry, Liverpool, Birmingham, Plymouth, Portsmouth, Bristol. The Blitz became a long ordeal. But the daylight battle for air superiority had been won. Britain survived. The Luftwaffe had failed for many reasons. It underestimated the RAF. It misunderstood the radar and control system. It changed targets at the wrong time. Its fighters lacked range. Its bombers were vulnerable. Its intelligence was poor. Its leadership was overconfident. And it was trying to win a campaign. It was not truly designed to fight. The Luftwaffe had been built mainly to support land campaigns. It was excellent at helping armies break through. But over Britain, there was no advancing German army. There were no captured airfields moving the front closer. There was only a determined island defense, protected by radar, fighters, command rooms, and geography. The RAF, meanwhile, had been prepared for exactly this task. Britain had invested in radar. It had built modern fighters. It had developed a coordinated air defense system. It had placed the right aircraft in the right role at the right moment. Courage mattered, but preparation mattered too. And now we return to the great question. Could Germany really have invaded Britain if it had won the air battle? The answer is uncertain, but Operation Sea Lion faced enormous obstacles. Air superiority alone would not guarantee success. The Royal Navy remained powerful. Even under air attack, British warships would likely have entered the Channel to attack German transports. The losses might have been severe. But if Britain faced invasion, the Royal Navy would have risked almost anything. Germany's invasion fleet was weak. The barges were improvised. The crossing would be slow. The supply line would be fragile. Bad weather could scatter the fleet. British destroyers, cruisers, submarines, motor torpedo boats, mines, coastal guns, and aircraft could attack it. The Germans also lacked experience in complex amphibious operations. When the Allies invaded Normandy in 1944, they used thousands of specialized landing craft. They had overwhelming naval power. They had overwhelming air power. They had years of experience. They had rehearsed. They had learned from deep North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and the Pacific. Even then, Normandy was dangerous. Germany in 1940 had none of those advantages. There is also the matter of Hitler's real priority. Even while Sea Lion remained a possibility, Hitler's thoughts were turning east. His deepest ideological goal was the destruction of the Soviet Union. He wanted land, resources, grain, oil, living space. By December 1940, he had issued the directive for Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. The wording was direct and determined, far more determined than his order about Britain. This was the war Hitler truly wanted. Britain had not been defeated. And because Britain had not been defeated, Germany would soon fight the very war it had feared. A war on two fronts. In 1941, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union while Britain remained in the war. Britain became a base for resistance, intelligence, bombing, supply, and eventually liberation. From British airfields, Allied aircraft would later strike Germany. From British ports, the invasion of Normandy would one day be launched. The island Hitler could not cross became the platform from which Europe would be entered again. The Battle of Britain did not end the Second World War. It did not destroy Nazi Germany. It did not stop the Blitz. It did not save Europe immediately. But it changed the direction of the war. It proved that Germany could be resisted. It kept Britain alive. It denied Hitler a quick Western victory. It preserved a base for future Allied operations. And perhaps most importantly, it gave hope at a time when hope was almost gone. The story is often told as the story of the few, the fighter pilots who rose into the sky against the Luftwaffe. That is true. They were young, brave, exhausted, and many never returned. But the story is larger than pilots. It is the story of radar operators watching screens in dim rooms, plotters moving markers across maps, ground crews repairing aircraft under threat of bombing, factory workers building engines and wings, anti-aircraft gunners watching the sky, firefighters entering burning streets, doctors and nurses treating the wounded, civilians sleeping in shelters while bombs fell above them. The battle was fought in the air, but it was endured on the ground. And in that endurance, Britain found strength. The summer of 1940 was a season of fear, but also of resolve. Across the Channel, the invasion barges waited. On British airfields, pilots waited. In London, families waited. In operations rooms, controllers waited for the next raid to appear. The bells did not ring for invasion. The German army did not cross the sea. The sky did not fall. Britain remained in the war. And because Britain remained in the war, the future remained open. The Battle of Britain reminds us that history often turns not only on armies and leaders, but on systems, preparation, patience, and ordinary people doing their work under extraordinary pressure. A mechanic tightening a bolt, a radar operator staying awake, a pilot climbing into a cockpit, a firefighter lifting a hose, a mother leading children into a shelter, a prime minister refusing surrender. a nation deciding that it would stand. In the end, Operation Sea Lion faded from immediate threat into historical question. But in the summer of 1940, it felt real. The fear was real. The danger was real. The fires were real. And so was the victory. Not a victory of conquest, not a victory of marching armies, but a victory of survival. Britain survived the summer of 1940. And because it survived, the war went on. The island remained unconquered. The sea remained uncrossed. The sky remained contested. And from that fragile survival came the long road back to Europe. A road that would lead, 4 years later, from British shores to the beaches of Normandy. A road that would lead from defense to liberation. A road that began in the quiet courage of a country waiting under the shadow of invasion and holding the line